Alright folks, this is my first impressions video looking at the troops section of the Eldar codex, the new Eldar codex. And we've seen some very interesting changes that are going to really change the way that Eldar plays, and really that it has to play. So let's get right into the first troop selection, Dire Avengers. Now, I'm not totally happy with the way that these guys have changed, because by getting more expensive without gaining any extra defensive abilities and losing the extra shot, and instead gaining kind of a great anti-elite shooting ability, you know, the ability to ignore armor on sixes, but they lose the option of extra shots, they become a bit of more of a niche unit. You know, they're meant to pop out and shoot at elite things. And unfortunately, Guardians have the exact same offensive stats as these guys, the same number of shots now, the same ballistic skill, the same armor ignoring ability on sixes. You know, for the points, you might as well pop out 10 Guardians if you're gonna just shoot at something to try to kill it. Now, mind you, they do have slightly better armor, which is still paper thin, given that your toughness 3 means you're going to take a lot of wounds. But they do have slightly better armor, and they have upgrade options, which the Guardians don't really have for the actual squad. Now, they do have plasma grenades in this edition, so they're still nice for that. They're very able to actually hurt the rear armor of vehicles. Let's talk about some of their upgrades, because the main thing about them is the upgrades on the Exarch. If you choose to take the Exarch, you have the option of taking the new version of the Shimmer Shield, and the new Shimmer Shield is a 5+ invulnerable all the time. It used to be 5+ only in combat, but we're talking a permanent 5+ invulnerable. That's kind of helpful, because these guys tended to be the target of a lot of AP4 weaponry. So if you really want to take that as an upgrade, it could actually be worth it for the unit, if you're taking the unit to kind of try to be more survivable. You know, I don't recommend taking these guys with the melee type upgrades, because you know, like the dire sword or whatever, because you're not really meant to fight with these guys, because again, they're probably going to be coming out of vehicles. You're not going to be able to assault. It may work in this edition yet, but my gut reaction is that if you're going to take any upgrades on an Exarch, you're going to take the Shimmer Shield to try to give them a permanent 5+ save. The Exarch can also take a Disarming Strike. He can take either a 4+ permanent invulnerable or a 3+ invulnerable, only in challenges and only if he decides to make a single attack. If you're in a challenge, though, it's better to just get the 3+ invulnerable, so the single attack is not really that much of a drawback. However, we're starting to load up points on this guy for things that are only really good in challenges, other than the 4+ invulnerable, which is good all the time. I would recommend avoiding those upgrades on this guy. You know, take the Shimmer Shield if you want, but avoid the other upgrades. Now, the one difference between these guys and Guardians is they may be a safer place to put your HQ if you're keeping an HQ, you know, in a unit. Then because of the survivability, because they can take a 5+ invulnerable, they may simply be a better place to put an HQ. So that's something to think about. Let's flip all the way over right to Guardians. So the you know, the new and improved Guardians, quite big changes to these guys, because they shoot just as well as Dire Avengers now. That's unbelievable to me, but a really cool change. In terms of their platforms, any of the platforms are worth it now, because for the most part they're cheaper, except for the missile launcher one, but most of the platforms are significantly cheaper in comparison to what they were before, like especially if we're talking Star Cannon or Brightlands. Those two in particular are a lot cheaper. The Shuriken Cannon, of course, isn't cheaper because now it runs, but any of those options are good. I would say if you're going on foot, take a platform. If you're going in a vehicle, you don't need the platform at all. Now that you don't have to take it at all, you don't need to pay for it. On the flip side, though, when you're popping out of a transport, it might be nice to have a high-strength gun to hit the rear armor of a vehicle if you're able to do that. Something to think about. I think these guys are going to benefit greatly if they're on the table from either a Warlock with Conceal or a Spirit Seer with Conceal. It's going to help them survive a lot. And that's really going to make them even better than Dire Avengers. If they're sitting in Area Terrain 5+ with Conceal against something that doesn't ignore cover, they're doing even better than Dire Avengers. So there's a lot of ways to make these guys extremely playable. And you don't even need that extra gun. You can keep them relatively cheaper than they were before, even, as long as you don't take the extra gun if you're going to pop out of a vehicle. Some interesting options. Really quickly, Storm Guardians. Haven't changed a ton. Not terribly blown away by them, but I still think they're best as kind of a pop out of the vehicle and surprise you unit. So we've got the option of 2 Meltas, which now are ballistic skill 4, so that's really good. or 2 flamers, still good. Still good to have a cheap little unit of these guys popping out of a transport, able to flame some chaff down, that's going to be swarming you. So pretty good options here. Jet bikes, so we've talked about them in my previous video. Greatly improved, a lot cheaper, better guns, and ballistic skill. I think now, because they're so cheap and because they're so deadly with their guns, larger units, like we're talking like up to 9 at a time, will actually work really well. Even though you don't have the fortune going, anymore, with consistency, I think larger units are going to work well, because that large unit of 9 plus a warlock is going to cost basically the same that a unit of 6 plus a warlock used to cost. That's huge savings. I think it's worth it to consider larger units with these guys, and I really do think it's worth having potentially a warlock with conceal in there, assuming he passes his leadership of 8, because it'll give them a really good cover save as they hop around the table. So something to really consider with your jet bikes, maybe taking larger units and try to find a way to take conceal on them. Let's flip all the way across to Rangers. So Rangers have changed a lot, much cheaper, much easier to field, a very, very cheap way to put some stealthy stuff into your army that has sniper rifles. Sniper rifles, of course, excellent against monsters, exceedingly average against infantry models, but very good against monsters because of the high toughness of monsters, and being able to potentially rend them is very nice. All in all, I'm not terribly crazy about these guys, simply because they're going to end up a lot of games just getting flamed to death or templated to death by something like a Helldrake, or simply not be that much of a help with their guns, since you need to roll those 4s to wound with a sniper rifle. But if you do take them, I think you have to realize that they are probably going to spend 90% of the game going to ground if they get shot at, because you need that go to ground save to get the 2+ if you're going to be in area terrain. And really, these guys are it's the cheapest troop choice to be able to sit on the table and just hold an objective while still having some kind of meaning to the battle. So if you're going to take them, you got to realize they're going to spend a lot of the game going to ground if they get shot at. So just be prepared to understand that. You paid very few points for them. You think you got a great gun, but they're probably going to be going to ground most of the time. Unless they get a shot off once in a while, if they're not considered a threat. So consider that. And last but not least, I want to talk about the Almighty Wave Serpent. What huge changes to this guy. The main difference is that the shield is extremely effective at keeping you alive in early turns, and in turns when you're, flatting out towards your opponent to try to deliver some kind of nasty cargo. And it's discharged as a free gun that is incredibly powerful. I mean, strength 7 gun, 2 to 7 shots, ignores cover. I mean, it's a really brutal gun. And to be perfectly honest, I think the way you have to foresee playing with these guys is this. Turn 1, if you're going second, of course, that shield is up. Nothing you can do about it. It's going to keep you nice and safe. And any turn where you need to go flat out to do something, of course, you're going to keep the shield up. But any other turn, when it's not turn 1, when it's not a turn you have to go flat out, you should be firing that second gun. You should be firing that Serpent Shield as an incredibly powerful gun, potentially twin-linking with a scatter laser. At that point, I probably wouldn't even pay the points for the upgraded Shuriken Cannon anymore, and just stick with those 2 guns, Serpent Shield and Top Gun, and use that gun, because it's a gift, it's a real gift. Now, in terms of vehicle upgrades, some of them really stand out. Spirit Stones, very, very useful, because to throwing off the shakings on, if you're getting shaken on a 2+, you get to ignore it, is really nice because you have a permanent gun that cannot be destroyed on this vehicle, and it's a deadly gun, and you want to fire it at full ballistic skill every round. So that is a useful upgrade for sure, and also not being stunned if you have guys inside, because guys inside hate being stuck in place for a round. Also, of course, Holofield stands out as a really good upgrade, because that means you're going to turn your cover save into pretty much a permanent 4+ whenever you move. Now, unfortunately, you do have to move to get it, but that's why the Serpent Shield is there to protect you on those turns when you don't move. So that's a really cool little combination there. You're going to get a 3+ cover save if you flat out with this guy, and if he has Holofields. That's very useful. Some of the other upgrades, varying levels of usefulness. Star Engines, I really don't see ever using for that point cost. For 15 points, I'm not going to just put that on my vehicle to go an extra 6 inches. Personally, for me, it's not worth it. That's not to say I would never use it. Like, I'm sure I'll be able to dream up some situation where I think, yeah, I'd really use that. But 90% of the time, I'm not going to use star engines. Vectored engine is pretty interesting. It means you can fly up, unload guys with your butt to gain some distance as they walk up to fire at something, and then in the shooting phase, twist around to actually blast something down. That seems, at least that's the way I understand them right now, and that seems very, very useful. I wish it wasn't, so many points though to put on here. Last upgrade to really talk about, crystal targeting matrix. I don't see you putting it on these guys. These are not the kind that are going to run up into the opponent's face and just fire like one little gun on top. Especially since they have two awesome guns now. You have your turret and you have your amazing serpent gun. So I don't see you using it too often on these guys. A lot of things that can outflank now. You want to put them inside. You're striking scorpions. I would happily buy one of these guys and show up from an outflank, ideally with an autark kind of, giving me rerolls, because that gun is so good. That's strength 7 on side armor of things potentially. If you get a little bit lucky, you hop up a few inches, get the side armor, get the rear armor of it. That's a deadly, deadly gun. So I could see this being an actual transport that you want to have stuff that's outflanking with it. If I had to go and kind of give thumbs up, thumbs down, through the codex, let's go bit by bit. I mean, big thumbs up, huge thumbs up for the Wave Serpent. What a great way to redesign it and not make it irrelevant. Make it, have a role in the new army. Talking to Guardians, thumbs up for the most part with these guys. Yeah, I wish they were cheaper instead of more expensive. However, with the stats they have and with the rending guns, with the pseudo rending guns, they're going to be very, very deadly on the tabletop. Mind you, they're not going to survive any better. They still die just as easily as they did last edition when they were cheaper, so you have to consider that. You really got to wipe out those targets that you're going to shoot at with them. A kind of thumb to the middle, pointing downwards almost for these guys. I'm really not terribly happy with what happened with Dire Avengers. Mind you, the the ability to take some upgrades does give them a potential for being able to do something. It's funny that they both have plasma grenades with the Guardians. If the Guardians didn't have plasma grenades, I'd say, okay, I see a real reason to take these guys. But luckily the Guardians do have plasma grenades, and you can just take them instead of these guys, which are more expensive. That's not to say I would never take them. I think in a list where you really need your troops to survive, it's better investing in something like these guys, because you know that they're going to have a chance to at least potentially have that better armor save, potentially with counterattack, maybe survive a combat that they shouldn't have survived. There's some interesting options with these guys still, but I'm not terribly impressed with them. Jet bikes, huge thumbs up on these guys. A lot of benefits to them. Can't wait to start using them. Rangers, a bit of a thumbs up, but mostly kind of thumb to the middle, really, I would say, because I'm not crazy about their abilities. Not crazy about what happened with them. I can't even find them. That's the problem now. But you know what they look like. The main thing with them is just they're not going to be a huge factor, I don't think, most battles. Things like flamers, and if you're playing competitively, you have to realize there's going to be lots of Helldrakes everywhere, and if they're sitting on a crucial objective, that Helldrake is going to go right for these guys. It's a tough nut to swallow, but so be it, right? And we talked about Storm Guardians. Last thing I wanted to mention, kind of a thumb to the middle on those guys. Not a lot of crazy benefits for Storm Guardians, but it is nice to have the Flamers or the option of the Meltas. And the Meltas being ballistic skill 4 now means you might actually get some use out of them. In the previous edition, I would have said never take the Meltas. It's not worth it. Take the 2 Flamers. But in this edition, you never know. I think the Flamers are still going to be a better option because if you get assaulted on Overwatch, they're pretty solid. But something to think about. I think all the troop types are useful in some way. Now, I also can't leave this troop section, and I shouldn't forget, without talking about Wraith Guard and Wraith Blades. How do they do as troops? Much better than they do as elite choices, if you can take them with the Spirit Seer. And troops that can fire Strength 10 AP2, shots that have instant kill and stuff, I mean, that's amazing. And troops that have an invulnerable save and high toughness and a really good melee weapon that sit on an objective are solid too. I think both of the types, Wraith Blades and Wraith Guard, you're going to want to actually deliver out of a Wave Serpent. I really feel that way, because When you pop out of a Wave Serpent, suddenly these guys have the same utility, not as powerful, not as effective, but still the same type of utility as fire dragons, and yet they can survive return fire. They can fight a little bit in melee compared to the fire dragons. So even if with the shooting guns, you're going to want the short range ones, you're going to want to pop them out of a vehicle. These guys don't want to walk across a table. They'll just get shot and plinked to death slowly by random shooting. But if they pop out of a Wave Serpent and run onto an objective, that's a real difficult situation for your opponent. I think as troops, they're very, very compelling. Very compelling. I can't wait to put some small 5-man units into some Wave Serpents and see what happens with that. The template AP2 guys, the D-Scythe guys, very deadly coming out of a Wave Serpent. Again, another reason you want to put them in a Wave Serpent. Now, these guys are bulky. You can only fit 5 of them in there, but that's all you need, you know? So something to really think about. If you're really looking at new options of troops, you don't need the giant unit of 10 anymore, and both the Wraith Guard options are very, very nasty. No surprise, GW has a new kit. They want to sell it, make them good, but you know, with good reason though. With good reason. It's been a long time coming. They are slightly cheaper than they used to be, but not significantly cheaper to say, oh gosh, go ahead and take a bunch of them. However, the fact that you can have small units be troops, very helpful for these guys. Okay, guys, I hope that was helpful. I hope that was informative and didn't bore you to tears. My first impressions on most of the troops are that they're pretty solid for the most part. I know there's probably some of you out there saying, like, what crack am I smoking? You know, who's ever going to use the Rangers or who's ever going to use Storm Guardians? But I do see merits for all that kind of stuff because I've seen what those kinds of units can do even in the old edition, and to see all those benefits to them now, some sizable benefits. It's a really good thing. One thing I want to talk about, one last thing, is battle focus on all these units. Before I forget, it does give them some measure of usefulness. The ability to run after shooting, because you can shoot at something and then run behind 4+ cover, or run behind terrain that you can't even be seen. That cannot be underestimated. So if you're complaining, like, why are these guys 1 point more expensive? Why are Guardians 1 point more expensive? I don't understand. Why is everything a little bit so more expensive? Is because they have such a combination of abilities. The ballistic skill combined with that battle focus ability, I mean, it makes for some really interesting shenanigans. Don't discard any of these troops just yet, okay? Alright guys, thanks for watching again, and see you with the next video.